The wind was colder than usual that late autumn afternoon, the kind that carried not just the bite of the season but the heaviness of unspoken stories. People hurried along the street, coats pulled tight, eyes glued to their phones. But among all the moving faces, one young girl moved slowly, almost uncertainly, as if each step felt heavier than the last. And when she finally stopped next to the small cafe table, where a single father sat with a cup of coffee he wasn't even drinking, her voice trembled with a mixture of fear, hope, and exhaustion. "Sir, can I sit here for a minute?" she whispered. What followed after that single question would change both their lives forever. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more heart-touching stories to life. The girl's name was Sophie, barely 19, her sweater worn thin at the elbows, and her backpack zipped halfway because the zipper had broken weeks ago. She didn't look dangerous, nor lost, more like someone who hadn't had a peaceful night in a very long time. The man she approached was Mark, a 35-year-old single dad who came to that cafe every Friday while his 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, was at her art class across the street. Mark had grown used to sitting alone with his thoughts, sipping lukewarm coffee, and counting down the minutes until Chloe burst through the doors with colorful hands and an even brighter smile. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the way Sophie's voice cracked, or the tired slump of her shoulders, or the fact that her eyes looked like someone who had run out of choices. Mark nodded softly, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat down slowly, as if afraid she might leave dirt on the seat, afraid she might not be welcome. Sophie stared at her hands first, rubbing her thumbs together nervously. The street behind her glowed with soft lamplights reflecting off the pavement, the world bustling while she seemed frozen in place. Mark waited, giving her space, not pushing her to talk. He'd learned long ago that some people didn't need questions. They needed quiet, patience, and a moment where someone didn't walk away. When Sophie finally spoke, her voice barely rose above the hum of passing cars. She explained how she had come to this town in Washington State, hoping for a fresh start after leaving a chaotic home where love had always felt conditional. She had dreamed of enrolling in community college, maybe getting a part-time job, living cheaply, just enough to feel human again. But dreams didn't feed you, and eventually her savings dwindled. She'd been sleeping on a friend's couch that wasn't really a couch, and then even that friend had moved away. Now she spent her nights in a bus station doing her best to stay warm and awake so trouble wouldn't find her. Mark listened, every word settling deeper into him. He had known hardship too. When his wife passed from illness, he'd spent months barely functioning, raising Chloe alone while trying to hold down a job and grief at the same time. Pain recognized pain, even across strangers. Sophie apologized repeatedly for taking his time, explaining that she just needed to rest for a moment, to sit somewhere that didn't feel hostile. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, her stomach curling in on itself. Mark's eyes softened as he finally picked up the menu. Without making a scene, he ordered her a warm sandwich and a bowl of soup. Sophie blinked fast, her lips parting as if she wanted to protest but didn't have the strength. As she ate slowly like someone who didn't want to seem greedy, Mark took a deeper breath and asked her what she wanted out of life. Not what she needed right now, but what she dreamed of. Sophie looked stunned by the question. No one had asked her that in years. She confessed shyly that she loved photography. She wanted to tell stories the way cameras did, with honesty, silent truth, and light. She didn't want to become famous or rich. She just wanted to make art that made people feel something, the same way she felt when she saw a sunset after a hard day. Mark felt something stir inside him. Chloe adored art too. Paintings, colors, shapes, everything that created beauty out of ordinary things. Maybe Sophie wasn't so different from the little girl he was raising. Maybe she just needed someone who believed she wasn't a burden. Not long after the food arrived, Chloe came running out of her art studio, her backpack bouncing behind her. Her smile was bright until she noticed Sophie sitting with her dad. She stopped beside the table, her big, curious eyes looking between them. Mark introduced Sophie gently, explaining she was a new friend, needing a warm place to sit. Chloe greeted her without hesitation, her kindness immediate, natural, something adults often forgot to carry with them. Sophie couldn't help but smile back. There was something healing about the innocence of children, the way they accepted people without scanning for flaws or differences. As they walked to the parking lot together later, the sky deepened into a soft blue, the air growing colder. Sophie thanked Mark again, insisting she didn't want to be a problem, that she would figure things out. But Mark could not shake what he'd seen, her thin sweater, her trembling hands, the fear behind her gratitude. He asked her if she had anywhere safe to go. She hesitated, then admitted no, not really. Mark stood silent for a moment, wrestling with responsibility and empathy. He wasn't wealthy. He worked long hours as a warehouse manager. But he had a heart that refused to look away. He offered to drive Sophie to a nearby shelter he trusted, one that worked closely with the community. She looked both relieved and ashamed, but eventually nodded. The shelter staff welcomed her warmly, providing a bed for the night, clean clothes, and a plan for the next few days. Mark gave Sophie his number, not out of pity, but because he genuinely wanted to check on her. Chloe hugged Sophie before they left, telling her she hoped they would see each other again, and they did. Over the next few weeks, Sophie began rebuilding the pieces of her life with the help of the shelter's programs. She attended career workshops, started applying for part-time jobs, and even volunteered to help with social media content using her photography skills. Mark and Chloe visited her every few days, bringing small encouragements, cookies Chloe had baked, gloves for the colder nights, or simply warm conversations that reminded Sophie she mattered. With each passing day, Sophie's confidence grew. She started taking pictures around town. Autumn leaves falling on sidewalks, people laughing at bus stops, sunlight reflecting on coffee shop windows. Mark saw her photos and was stunned by the raw emotion in them. It was as if she captured life in its most honest form. One afternoon, about 2 months after their first meeting, the shelter director told Sophie that a local magazine was looking for a junior photographer for holiday projects. They recommended her without hesitation. She went to the interview in the donated clothes she'd received, hands shaking but heart determined. She got the job. When Sophie told Mark and Chloe the news, the three of them stood in the parking lot hugging as snowflakes began to fall. Sophie cried. Not because the job solved everything, but because it proved she still had a future worth fighting for. Her life didn't magically transform overnight, but it changed enough to give her hope. She found a small shared apartment through the shelter's housing program, bought herself a cheap but reliable secondhand camera, and started working steadily. Her days filled with editing photos, learning new techniques, and capturing the small joys around her. But the biggest change wasn't her job. It was the sense of belonging she had gained. Mark and Chloe had become her anchor, her makeshift family. She spent weekends with them, helping Chloe with school projects or cooking simple dinners that filled the home with warmth. Mark admired her resilience, how she transformed heartbreak into art, how she gave the world beauty, even when she'd been given so little in return. Sophie never forgot the moment that started it all, that cold afternoon, when she'd swallowed her pride and asked a stranger, "Sir, can I sit here for a minute?" She didn't know then that she was sitting down not just at a cafe table, but at the beginning of a new chapter. If this story moved your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these meaningful stories alive. Before you read the ending, please comment below what would you have done if Sophie approached you that day. As winter melted into spring, Sophie stood in a small local gallery displaying her first photography exhibit. People admired her work, photos of real moments, real people, real struggles. Mark and Chloe stood beside her proudly, and as Sophie looked around at the faces moved by her art, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt whole. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment of grace, one person who refuses to look away, one seat at a cafe table to change a life forever. And that day, kindness won.